Welcome back to the most electrifying IDP show in fantasy sports. As always, we are the IDP Heat Seekers, and tonight we are going to be tearing it up, not tearing it up, but tearing it up, talking rookie linebackers. Draft is just over a week away. The smoke screens are hot and heavy about your favorite team and who's going to draft some linebackers. Well, tonight, we're not doing any smoke screens. We're just going to help you figure out which one of these linebackers is worth drafting and which ones aren't. But with that being said, I am joined by two of the most amazing individuals this side of the California. I don't know. Austin, how are you, my friend? How's it going in your world tonight?
Good. Busy week this week. And we talked off air about it, but yeah, crazy week for me. Monday has already been crazy, so it's just a perfect way to lead into the week. But other than that, it's really great. Looking forward to this show today as we get to talk about my favorite position on the field.
That is it. It is your favorite position. And my favorite co-host, Kraig Reith. How are you tonight, my friend?
I'm doing great. I'm waiting for you to be giving us some of those smoke screens, like the Lions taking Malik Willis here at number 2, but I guess we got to wait for a different show for that.
Turn the card in.
That's funny. Are we going to do this every week? Are we going to up to the draft where we just literally speculate on which quarterback the Lions are going to take?
Yeah, sure. Maybe next week it'll be Kenny Pickett or, who knows?
If they take a quarterback in the first round, I would be surprised. It just does not seem – I would say my hot take for this draft is nobody drafts a quarterback in the first round, but I know that somebody will. It's going to happen. I just don't think it should. I mean, there's so many good players at other positions, like linebacker, that should go in the first round that'll slip down just because, everyone wants that fifth-year option. I keep telling myself – I jotted down a note to myself. I really need to write an article on if the fifth-year option gets used all that much in comparison to how many guys are drafted in the first round. So I don't feel like when we talk about it, it happens nearly as often as people talk about it. Like when you're listening to, like even today, I was listening to Move the Sticks, and they were talking about, we want to trade back up into the first round to get that fifth-year option. I was like, do people really focus on the fifth-year option that much with how much money goes around in the NFL these days? I don't know. That's just the crazy things I think about when thinking football. Speaking of crazy things, as always, if you want to see our rankings for IDP, rotoheat.com, we've got all of it on there when it comes to combo offense, defense, rookies only, IDP only, all that good stuff. So with that being said, we are going to be talking tiers, and we're going to kind of try to treat it. We'll go over here. I like this better. We're going to go over here, and we're going to do it very similar to what we've been doing with tiers, where we just kind of take a guy, and we're going to move him up. He's either going to be a stud. We know we love our studs. He's either going to be a solid starter. He's going to be a depth guy that maybe not the most intriguing, but definitely somebody that you want to have on your fantasy radar at some level. And waiver wire, the guys you just want to not grab at all. So, Kraig Reith, why don't you get us started? I'm not going to make you pick a player. I'm going to let you choose. Who do you want to talk about first, and where are we going to put him?
If you're not going to make me take a player, we could just, sit here and not pick anyone if you're not going to pick anyone. But we won't do that.
Are we going to stare into each other's eyes again?
We usually save that for off air. So for now, let's not go with the really exciting guys that everyone always talks about.
You would lead the show in like that, Kraig.
Yeah, we want to save those for spur of the moment. We can't just get the top name guys away right away. I'm going to go with. I'll be interested to see what you guys think. Damone Clark, linebacker from LSU. So he's going to be an interesting case study, and teams aren't going to have a whole lot of information about his medicals because he just recently had spinal surgery, and I think we're talking about something that serious that's going to drop him from where he should be. So he's probably – I'm just going to put him up to the depth area because I do like him, but that injury scares me, and I don't want to be putting him higher up than that with that big of a serious unknown. Like, I know with a lot of these common surgeries – Achilles, even the ACL stuff, it seems like that's Tommy John in baseball, almost where it happens, and you come back from it better than ever almost for most of these players. But spinal stuff, head stuff, that's the stuff that scares me a lot more. And I do think that he has talent, but considering that he already had some issues, like His burst wasn't necessarily maybe what you'd want it to be. You would have issues with misdirection and overrunning things. That sort of stuff has to do with your spine a lot. Most things have to do with your spine, but that sort of stuff with the body movement and the twisting and all that really plays into that. So I'm not really ready to put him up higher than that, given that injury.
So, yeah, I mean, obviously the injury, when you get into injuries, the common ones people are normally willing to kind of brush off, which is funny, ACLs and all the knee related injuries used to be a big deal. And now people don't worry about them so much. This one is considerably different, and one of those where you don't really know. I know pre-draft, which we are still currently in, a lot of people were kind of pegging him in the late day 2, kind of 3rd round, 4th round grade. I think this slides him down into the conversation where he's probably 5th, 6th. I mean, it really depends. A team could take him that's willing to stash him in the somewhere between the 4th and the 6th round. I would think in the NFL draft. In fantasy drafts, I'm probably not even going to touch him for now, just to wait and see. I mean, because most IDP leagues I'm in, outside of a couple that Kraig and I are in together, are not insanely deep. So I'm not going to take a chance on a guy that may not even see the field this year, depending on how quickly he bounces back. The one thing I will say is that Clark is really good at attacking. Just letting him go and get after, and try to get behind the line of scrimmage and do some things there. Good tackler, I'd say plus tackler, probably one of the, I'd say he's probably around somewhere in the 5 to 7 range in the class when it comes to tackling ability. He's better than some of these guys, but there's clearly probably a 3 to 5 of them that are better than him. So I like him. I don't hate him. I'm fine with depth. In my mind, he was waiver wire, but if you feel strongly about him as depth, I don't really care. What do you think, Austin?
Yeah, so I mean, we want to talk about Damone Clark, the player. He's got a high motor. He flies around the field. He's a pretty good tackler, like you said, in this class. He's probably around that top 5, maybe fringe top 5. He does some things that are, he's fast. He plays fast and all of that, but the injury certainly concerns me. Obviously not being a doctor and not really knowing exactly how these injuries go. This does seem more serious than ACLs. And, we look at, and I don't know if this was the same or a similar injury, but a back injury from a guy on the offensive side, Justin Ross. I think he had something similar to this. And you saw just kind of what it was, how difficult it was for him to get back. And then he's lost a lot of momentum going into rookie drafts and into the NFL draft just because of that injury. And he was able to come back and play, but, just never really returned the way we saw him before he left. So, that kind of scares me. Back injuries are something that I think, especially playing linebacker at such a physical, high impact position, this is something that could linger. He could potentially re-injure, and that concerns me. So I'm probably leaving him on the waiver wire as well.
So just to add to, because we want to make sure we give you as much information as humanly possible, LSU Wire reported March 24th, Damone Clark is expected to miss the entirety of his rookie season due to undergoing spinal fusion surgery. He obviously was the SEC's leading tackler last year, but they expect him to miss the entirety of his rookie season, but expect him to make a full recovery. So I guess the question then we have to answer, or at least paint the picture for, is, do you draft this guy for a taxi squad spot because the potential? Do you steer clear because of spinal fusion surgery? I mean, that's a dangerous thing there. Or do we leave him where he is and put him as depth? So Kraig, I'll throw it back to you first, then Austin can get on it. What do you think there?
I'm probably not drafting him in most of the leagues where I have taxi spots. There's something else that I'm going to be stashing on a taxi spot. If there's, 5 to 10 per team and you're in a deep league, maybe you can consider it. But to me, the whole expected to make a full recovery thing, I don't even pay attention to that. I just pay more attention about the injury. Yeah, most of these guys do end up coming back from injuries these days. But when was the last time we saw an article that said so-and-so not expected to come back, or, this is expected to just end his career, when it's like really unknown at this point? I mean, you don't see that. So I don't read a whole lot into that. And I do think with today's modern medicine and everything, if things go well, it sounds like it's a herniated disc, it's a spinal fusion. There are guys that have dealt with this and come back and had careers. But like Austin said, it just scares me at this point where I'm not going to be using any real draft capital on him because of it.
Any follow-up, Austin, or did Kraig nail it?
No, I think Kraig nailed it. And if you look down here at the list that we've got below, you're going to see a whole bunch of names that you could probably prioritize on that taxi squad for this season at least. And then, for a whole lot less, you could probably just grab Damone Clark at your own leisure, next year or before the year next year if you think that you need that depth and you have that kind of depth in your league. I think that's a player like that's reserved for the deepest of leagues for sure.
Okay. Then it's up to you now, my friend. Who are you taking? Who do you want to talk about? Where are we putting them? And as always, folks, thank you for dropping comments. We will get to those here in a little bit. So stay tuned.
Whew. All right. Well, we'll stay away from the top two, but I am going to go for a player that I like a ton and I'm really excited about. Wasn't playing for a Power 5 school, but that's Chad Muma. And we're going to go ahead we're going to move Chad Muma up to a starter. I'm not ready to put him in the stud category just because of where, the football that he played. Granted, Wyoming, not the worst of schools and not the worst of, teams that they're playing against. He was consistent. Chad Muma, he got a lot of tackles. He has a high motor. He plays hard. He goes and he just gets those tackles and he's always in the right spot on the field. The only thing, I do worry about with him is his ability to cover. Will his size get in the way a little bit? Will it limit his upside? But I'm ready to say he's a solid starter in fantasy football and probably a solid starter in the NFL as well. So I think that's just the appropriate tier for Chad Muma.
Kraig.
Yeah, it's the easy comp to make because they played at the same school, but kind of what you saw to Logan Wilson wouldn't surprise me. Athletically, Chad Muma, rates a little bit better if you're looking at that overall athletic score. But we saw Logan Wilson this past year. He didn't really play a whole lot his first year, came out this year, and as the season went on, he really showed what he can do, and he's sort of one of those under the radar guys we talked about earlier this offseason. So I put him in that same sort of category with the potential that, if he gets that sort of break in that position where the Bengals really didn't have a whole lot at that linebacker spot and they've been shuffling through guys and, he gets a chance to start and just takes it over. Yeah, I could see that. Probably not year one, but he should be able to see the field a bit and get some experience. And I do like him. To your point, the whole coverage thing, there's some questions about that. And he doesn't really have that top end speed out of a linebacker. That's not the way that he's built, but he should get probably day 2 draft capital, which would be great for him, sort of like Wilson. I think he was in the third.
I'm about to say, you're hearing a lot of people kind of project him as a second round pick. I think last time I checked, and he's one of the better tacklers in this class. Like I would say, arguably one of the top 3 tacklers, maybe even in conversation for kind of the best tackler, most sound tackler in this class. Which you like. He's strong against the run, which for those of you that have leagues that that maybe are not crazy high scoring when it comes to kind of the special things, interceptions, fumbles, all that. And, just a guy who's a tackle machine could be a solid get for you. This would be that type of guy in my mind. And it's probably mostly because of the defense he's in there at Wyoming. But, getting a guy with a solid floor, I feel like that's this guy. So definitely a starter. It's tough for me. When preparing for this show, I really didn't consider any of these guys true studs at this point. As much as I like, Lloyd and Benito and Dean, I'm like, in my mind, stud, it's a tier by itself, obviously, with a special kind of players. The Parsons of the world is a perfect example for anyone who's newer to IDP. That's a stud type player. I don't know if any of these guys have deserved that yet. So Chad, I think, is definitely a solid starter. Because I think he'll probably step in day 1 and give you something, give you some solid production, most likely. Anything else you want to add, Austin?
No, I think that's it. That's good.
Sorry. You put your hand in front of your mouth, and I was not sure if you were raising your hand like we were in class and you were about to school me, or you were covering up a burp. I had no idea.
No, I had an itch.
All right.
Yeah.
So let's see here. For me, I think I'm going to go Quay Walker from Georgia. Um, and I don't really know that I like putting him as a starter, but I'm putting him as a starter at the moment because I think people are going to draft him to be a starting linebacker, but I think he's more of a developmental guy in my mind. I think he's got the athletic ability and the traits and tools to develop into a nice starter, but I don't know if you can trust him day one. When you look at Georgia's defense, Jordan Davis will always be underrated in my mind because that guy wreaked havoc. I think he made it so much easier for everybody around him to be successful just because of how good he is. The defensive ends, and then obviously the guys in the second level really were the beneficiaries of him. So I think Walker is a guy that people will draft. I think last I heard when I was looking into it, he's kind of a late 2, 3, when it comes to NFL draft, probably second or third round type guy. I'm worried about, and I don't want to say worried like long-term worried, but he needs some coaching. I think that the instincts are not necessarily there. He was allowed to just kind of attack and use his physical traits and tools to really go after guys. But when I was thinking about these tiers, I was trying to think, okay, who are long-term guys? In the long term, who am I drafting, expecting them to be something of value? And Quay Walker, I think, could develop into something of value. So I would put him as a starter. I just wouldn't be starting him day one. This is you're getting him. All right, I'm putting him as depth because if you can't start him day one, he's not really a starter, right? Kraig, go ahead and tell me that I'm crazy or tell me that I'm not crazy.
Yeah, I just don't know if we're talking from an IDP perspective, if he's going to have that long-term value as a guy that's going to be on the field for 3 downs, which is where there's fewer and fewer of those in the NFL. So, as it translates, there's more guys in sort of that middle gray area that you can end up having to start because you don't have those true 3-down studs anymore. And I was going to have him probably near the top of where we end up having our depth area, although, I wasn't going to sit here and fight you tooth and nail if you want to put him in starter. I just see him as someone that, needs more refinement in coverage. And, he's a big dude for a linebacker. He's like 6'4", 240. He does move well. He's got that explosive sort of, movement off the ball, but his reaction time isn't, for what I had, the best that you'd want. And, he's great in short areas, but doesn't have that speed to go all over the field that you'd want on a guy that out there on coverage down. So I just have concerns whether or not he's just going to sort of end up being out there for 2 downs maybe, which to me feels like more of a depth piece overall long-term.
Well, I wonder if it may, just kind of listening to you and your comments on him, I wonder if a team tries to get him, put, 10, 15, 20 pounds on him and see if he can just be an edge guy and be a defensive end, try to put hand in a dirt type thing.
Good.
I mean, because there's some questions about some of those traits and some of the things he can or can't do potentially. Do they move him around and does this make it a moot point? I don't know. Austin, what do you think, bud?
Yeah, I mean, he was surrounded by a ton of talent in Georgia, and he was relatively ineffective as a pass rusher. So I'm not sure that adding weight, it could potentially help, but I don't think he really had, we talked a little bit last week about edge defenders and some of the things that they would have in their bag. Put your hand in the dirt and go. That's one thing, but with tackles in the NFL, you've got to have several things you can go to. And I'm just not sure that Quay Walker has that, despite being as athletic as he is. He's a really great tackler. He's been a really great tackler his entire career. But one thing he has struggled in, like Kraig alluded to, was the coverage. He's really not great at pass rushing. And overall, his defense just wasn't great. Now, he's not a waiver wire guy for sure, but I could definitely make the case that, if you're making him a starter right now, you're probably betting high. And so maybe a depth spot is just the right spot for him.
Okay, I like it. All right, Kraig, back to you, my friend. Who are we talking about next and where are you putting him?
We're going to stick with Georgia, and I sort of have a theme here, and we're not going to go to the big name. We're going to go to Channing for the next one. And honestly, right now, for me, he's someone to leave on the waiver wire. And he's kind of the opposite.
Ooh.
He's kind of the opposite of Quay Walker in that Channing was much better at the whole coverage stuff compared to Quay, which bodes well for the NFL. and I think he was the third leading tackler on the team overall, but he wasn't a starter for Georgia. And I have questions about mainly Quay and Channing, but you could also throw this up there with Nakobe, how much that defensive line helped them with just overpowering people and letting them run free and let them be clean to go out there and make those tackles. And we know it's a step up as far as athletes in the NFL. And then also, you're not going to always have those great defensive lines to keep you clean, to let you roam free and stuff. So I really want to see where he goes. And I don't see him as a starter right away in the NFL. I do think he'll be out there on passing downs. Maybe he can, grow into more of a role because he has that ability to play in coverage on that sort of 3-down. But I want to see what team he goes to, and I want to see what position they're going to put him in. And I just don't feel that he's even going to be out there for more than, a backup coverage sort of role player right now.
I think he's got better tackling ability than Walker as it stands today. But I think Walker has the better, the kind of the better ceiling potential long-term because of the athletic profile. It's such a weird, again, the strength of that defensive line, I think, made it easier for Walker and Tindall to really look better than they probably were ready to look. Nakobe Dean obviously is the outlier of the three linebackers that we're going to talk about tonight. But Austin, what do you think? Do you feel waiver wire is a good spot for Tindall?
Yeah, it definitely did make that defensive line definitely did make it easier for those guys to play in that system and have success. But I will say it makes it harder to evaluate those guys.
Yeah.
You're not really sure exactly who's helping who. I'll say, I think that Channing Tindall, he does a lot of things really well. The only thing that worries me with him was, he did only have 1 year of production. But I will say in that 1 year, I was pretty impressed with the level of production that he had, just having limited snaps before that. And him being able to come in and make that kind of an impact on that defense kind of does say a lot. I do think he's a developmental player, somebody who the NFL will use as a developmental player, but somebody that I think by the end of this episode, when we look at all the guys that we have on waiver wire, he could be one of the names that stands out as a guy who you probably could have moved up. And if you're going to gamble on him and try to move him up one tier, he's probably the one guy that you would go back and go, yeah, we probably could have done that when it's all said and done. Hindsight's always 2020.
Always 2020. All right, so who are we talking about next and where are you putting them?
Let's see. Let's go with Devin Lloyd. And I am going to do what you said you didn't want to do, and I'm going to put him in the stud category. And I'll tell you why. He's got the size, 6'3", 237. He's got the athletic profile, and when you look at what he's done in his career, he's been successful. In 2019, 2021, he played over 700 snaps each year, and he had a lot of production. Obviously, this being his best year, but he's shown a lot in a lot of different ways. His coverage was pretty good. He's a good tackler, not the best tackler in the class for sure. He does have a higher missed tackle percentage than you'd like to see from what you think is probably the top linebacker in this class, but his rush defense is good. His pass rush is really good. So just overall, his defense is really good. He's a guy that I think could be a stud, and this is why. He does so many things well that he's going to be able to stay on the field more, and that's what you want. You need a guy that's going to stay on and not get subbed off when they run it on third down, obvious passing downs and things like that. He's a 4-down guy. He's a guy that you're going to want to have on the field. He should get the draft capital to go along with it. So I'm going to say he's going to be a stud.
Yeah, I don't have any reason to argue that. He's easily the first linebacker taken, and if you told me only one linebacker was taken in the first round, it would probably be Lloyd, and it wouldn't surprise me at all. There's really nothing to hate about his game. I think he could be in either scheme. They could have him in a 4-3, could have him in a 3-4. He's got the agility, ability, mobility to play in sub packages as well. I don't really have any concerns with him. If saying he's a stud doesn't bother me. I mean, in my mind, I couldn't work myself to calling any of these guys true studs just because I feel like there's a little bit to go for some of these guys, but saying he's a stud wouldn't surprise me. Kraig, anything that's good, bad, or otherwise about Devin Lloyd?
I agree with Austin.
Okay. All right. So I'm going to jump around a little bit. I'm going to do Christian Harris. This one I struggle with, which is why I want to talk about him, because this is the one guy in this entirety of this draft that I want to like. There's a lot that I feel like I like about him. I liked his motor. I liked his tackling ability. But then I kept seeing inconsistencies. So I think he's probably drafted in the second round. I'm going to put him as a starter, and I'm hoping that you guys will either confirm or deny my accusations. I saw inconsistencies in his tackling when it came to like taking, kind of the angles he took when he would tackle guys and some of the ways that he would do that. And it concerned me. But then when you watch this defense, he just kept standing out to me as I'm watching this defense on the field, and it's a good defense. I'm like, all right, I don't typically touch Alabama linebackers because they tend to be very hit or miss, but I feel pretty good about this kid. So, Kraig, am I crazy? Is he not a starter? What do you think? I threw you a softball. You just got
I wouldn't have him there. I think he could end up being one, but to your comments, the things that I have down for him is issues, quote unquote, tackling, change of direction, over pursuit. I mean, he's got the athletic profile. He's got the good size. He's a physical player. He can do the coverage. I mean, he could play sort of like you said about Lloyd. He could play all over the linebacker position, depending on where a team wants to line him up and use him. And I think those things that they have about him, the tackling, the pursuit, and all that stuff, that's coachable stuff. If he goes to a good situation, someone's willing to learn, that stuff you can coach out of players to improve upon. So I don't hate it. I just he didn't excite
That's exactly how I felt.
He didn't excite me. And if I'm having someone as a starter, I want to be excited about him. So I don't hate it having him at the end of where we'd have the starters, but
you don't love it.
No.
That's how I felt. Austin, what are you thinking?
Pretty much on par with what you guys are thinking on Christian Harris. His coverage is really not good at all. He definitely has some flaws in his game, and kind of opposite of what we said about Nakobe Dean, or no, not Nakobe Dean, sorry, but Devin Lloyd, is just that I worry about him being able to stay on the field. He gets his own tier.
There you go. He's not depth. He's not a starter.
I would have probably just thrown him down in depth, put him one more down, but give him his own tier. That's fine.
We couldn't agree. We'll throw him in the middle.
We're gonna end up with 4 guys in the Christian Harris tier.
Oh, gotta love it. All right,
we gotta make that happen.
There's Christian Harris for you people. We just don't know. Buyer beware. All right, so who are we talking about next, Kraig, and where are you putting him?
To the point about Harris, though, too, we kind of mentioned with him and, Lloyd to a higher or lesser degree, depending on how you want to look at it, about being able to play all over the field, being good or bad for them. Landing spot can matter. If they decide that they want to put Christian Harris over, Sam or something for 2 downs and then move him out, or, whatever they do. I'm not saying that's something they should do. It's just, as an example,
sure, that
can dictate their potential use for IDP, which is what we're talking about here. Again, we're not saying, oh, this guy's going to be a terrible NFL player or whatever, but where you end up playing linebacker and how much you're on the field ends up mattering a lot these days. And that's where I think some of these things, when we're talking about, where would we put these guys? This isn't necessarily, oh, this guy can't start in the NFL right away. I mean, put him in the right situation, he might get thrown into being a starter, even if we don't think for IDP that he would be overly useful. And we could end up seeing that with some of these guys that we're going to talk about later on. So just keep in mind the context of this. So, and I bring that up.
I'm about saying being a good NFL player doesn't always make you a good fantasy football player.
Yep. Very true. And to that point about the flexibility sort of stuff, someone that I'm going to leave down in the waiver wire tier is JoJo. So he's probably going to end up being a day 3 type of player. He is small for a linebacker. He's like 6'1", 225. The interesting thing about him is he's versatile. He's played safety. He's played slot corner. He's sort of built more as a guy in the secondary more. And he's great in coverage, which we just talked about in the NFL. It's very useful these days. 2 other downsides. He has 2 ACL tears already. He's going to be 25 going into this season, which is old for a rookie. So, again, put him in the right situation. Could he end up being sort of a some people had thought about maybe Isaiah Simmons or a JOK or, Jeremy Chin, where they can play like a chess piece all over the field to a much lesser degree than what those guys did, largely due to draft capital. I think he could be used that way, but I'm not seeing him as a guy that's going to be a long-term starter or probably a realistic starter for most of his career in the NFL. So draft capital, all those negatives for him. He's a nice little chess piece that, Bill Belichick, I think, could certainly find a use for or something like that. But I just don't see him starting. So waiver wire it is for me.
Well, and he's a pretty speedy dude. I think what was he, low 4.6s? When you saw that speed on the field when he played, you are absolutely on. It wouldn't surprise me in the least if somebody used this guy in the secondary or, in sub packages more specifically. It's a tough one because that really does mitigate how many snaps he's getting throughout the year and how often he's on the field. Austin, anything else that you want to add to JoJo?
No, I got nothing for JoJo.
All right, so move on. Who are we talking about next? And where?
KC.
Let's take Leo Chanal.
Wrong decade.
We're gonna take Leo Chanal and move him up to starter right there alongside Chad Muma.
Oh.
It's not as spicy as what you think. Leo Chanal moved really well at the combine. He ran a 4.53. So we were just talking about JoJo and how he was, we thought he could move around well. This guy, Leo Chanal, he's 6'3", 250 pounds, and he's moving like a little guy. So he's moving a lot of weight, and he's coming after you. And I think that shows in his pass rush scores. He showed that he was very effective in the pass rush. He's obviously a strong player. At the point of attack, he's fast, and he can combine that with some, different moves and things along the defensive line that allow him to get, to get free and get to the quarterback. He's shown an ability to get to the quarterback. He's a good tackler, good run defender. I think he just does a lot of things really well. The one thing I did worry about was his coverage, but with that 4.53, that I'm curious to see if he's able to at least be effective enough in that area in the NFL to keep him on the field, or to use his other strengths to maybe just slide down to the defensive line and just be an edge rusher and to create some pressure on those third downs, try to get the quarterback uncomfortable and get him off the field that way. So I really think that he's going to be effective when he gets the chance. Hopefully he gets the draft capital and the opportunity falls to the right landing spot. But if he does, I would say he could be a starter and just as effective as he is as a pass rusher, maybe even better.
So is he a more athletic Joe Scobert?
Oh, way more athletic, I would think. Yeah,
I would say a pretty short tackler. Yeah, I mean the size. I mean all that.
Yeah.
Just makes me think. Of that. What do you think, Kraig?
I worried about the size. I was just gonna say I worried about the size kind of being something that would limit him until we watched him run his 40. Which if he's that's just a straight line speed. What's his change of direction like? Things like that. There's a lot of other things that go into just being able to line up and play football. And running a 40 is actually about as useless in my mind as any stat in that regard. But it does help to show that this guy, being 250 pounds, like he has the ability to move.
He's not Josie Jewell, is what you're saying.
Oh God, no.
Kraig, anything else you want to add?
Brad's always throwing shade at these guys. Yeah, I do have him as
they're coming after me.
I do have him as a starter. I believe he was tied for second in it. Relative athletic score, it's this calculation based on all the testing that these guys do that you can find online. It's a nice little tool to use, and it does not. I think it's even on their site where they talk about the predictability of the relative athletic score to actual NFL production. It isn't the be all end all by any means, but it is a nice indication of how well this guy can move, the things that they do well and doesn't do well. And I think Chanal and Brandon Smith, who we haven't talked about yet, were tied for second with relative athletic score, which to me says great, as far as what Austin said about being able to go out there and do the things in coverage when she gets coached up more, because quite frankly, he wasn't asked to do a whole lot of that at Wisconsin. And he didn't do a whole lot his first 2 years. He showed up in a big way this past year and, sort of moved himself up into the conversation for that day too. And I think, like Austin said, cemented it with the way he tested. So, yeah, I got him up as a starter.
If you want to go on Raz, and we want to talk a little Raz, let's go to Troy Anderson, the kid from, Montana State.
Yep.
He's a guy that I think, and I'm putting him ahead of all these other guys on the depth. He's a guy I do expect to develop into a really solid kind of NFL starter and could be fantasy relevant. He's huge. I mean, was he 6'4", 6'5"? He's got good speed. I mean, his RAS score is strong. I think it was either in 9.9.
He was a 10.
Yeah, he was. I was going to say I saw one that was like 9.9, and then something that I thought I read was 10 as well. So he's got a lot of elite, numbers to go with him. When you saw him at Montana State, I think you could tell he was kind of a raw prospect. There was a lot of newness to him. I don't know. I didn't really dig into what he did before Montana State. My guess is he probably wasn't a linebacker the entirety of his football career, but he's a guy that I really think is somebody that we want to keep an eye on as we move along. I'm not going to say he's somebody you're drafting right now. He's definitely somebody who I think is a depth guy. Whether you draft him as a depth guy or you stash him after the draft, as a kind of a priority free agent in fantasy, I'm definitely going to try to at least get him on a roster or two and see. And I do apologize. I did spell his name wrong. I'm noticing that now. That's O-N instead of E-N. My apologies to the Anderson family. I'm telling you. I didn't have my editor. No editor makes me all sorts of whopper jawed. Austin, what do you think about Troy Anderson, Montana State linebacker?
Yeah, I mean, if you like the guy, he's probably a good depth piece. I think I agree that he could be developed. He doesn't do anything for me as far as fantasy relevance.
Come on, fight him, Austin.
Yeah, I'm just not into Troy Anderson as much. He's just small ball. We'll see. I don't know. If you want to,
I love those small school linebackers. It's a good story.
Yeah, I mean, if you're leaving Channing Tindall on the waiver wire, why not Troy Anderson for me? That's kind of where I'm at with it. Sorry, Brad.
You're not sorry, Kraig.
Yeah,
I break it.
I'm having him as a guy that I'm targeting late in drafts, and I would target him myself over Channing.
Yeah,
just because of that. Well, maybe, but he's the kind of guy with the size and that athletic profile, and the guy with a high motor that's going to go out there to try to learn. And we know there's going to be a learning curve with him because he goes from a smaller school in competition. If I'm in one of these deep leagues and I have a 4th or 5th round pick that I'm going to be taking a linebacker with, and I know that I can sit and wait on, he's a guy that I'm going to wait on just because of that athletic profile. So, yeah, I really like him. He's probably going to be day 3, but he's raw. But you also know that going into it, where someone more like Channing, you did see him perform at a high level at Georgia, but it's the other side of that coin where, okay, because of all these other pieces around him, is he actually that good, or are you overpaying for him at this point because of the players that were around him? And like Brad said, with the Alabama linebackers, we've been bitten time and time again with, well, not necessarily us, but the community. We're investing in these guys, and they don't just pan out because of what they had around them in college. And that's my concern with those sort of lower tier, what we have here, linebackers from Georgia.
All right. So next up, we got probably about 10-ish minutes before I want to take some questions. So let's rapid fire the last 5 names. Let's start with Nakobe Dean. Obviously, he's going to be near the top. Do you guys think starter, stud? Which one? I would put him at the top of the starter conversation, but I tend to be a little bit harder on a grading.
That's probably where I would put him, and I would like to put him in the stud category if I thought he could be more reliable in coverage. He did have good coverage, but I think he struggles with like the top end speed. I'm not sure he's as quick moving around as some, like Devin Lloyd. So I would probably leave him at the top of the starter category.
Kraig.
Yeah, we're going to get a lot of hate mail for this. I'm kidding. We never get hate mail. Send us hate mail if you want. Brad at rotoheat.com. Send all your hate mail to Brad at rotoheat.com, or throw it in the comments. We love it there too. Yeah, he is, okay, so he's undersized for a linebacker. That's one of the knocks about him. Like we said with the other guys, all the players around him, was some of the parts greater than, whatever that old saying is that I can't think of because I'm ready for that here.
Yeah.
He takes bad angles at times. If he gets caught, he has trouble disengaging because of his size and stuff. This is nitpicky, of course, and he is going to probably be second linebacker taken off. And if I had to bet, and maybe we'll talk about this next week on our draft preview show for the IDP side, one of the only two linebackers taken. Okay, so like inside linebackers taken on day one, not counting those edge guys. So someone's going to draft him higher than I am. I don't have a problem putting in starter, but I have a hard time saying he's going to be a stud.
As a guy who probably was one of the Stephen Tulloch fan club owners, I have no problem picking an undersized guy if he's got it. And I think Nakobe Dean's got it and will be successful at the next level. But I can't put him in the stud category just because it really doesn't have to be a perfect storm per se, but in the way the NFL works nowadays, it just feels like maybe he won't be on the field a huge amount of snaps to the level of like a guy like a Devin Lloyd to be the elite stud like production. So I have a little bit of concerns about some of those things, but not enough to really hate on him. I mean, he's still a starter in my mind. And I don't care.
The fourth round is very different than Dean in the teens.
Right, for sure. Yeah, 100%. All right, Brandon Smith. I had him on the waiver wire still. He definitely has got some intrigue about him, but I'm just not sold on him. Austin, Kraig, anything?
I'm with it. I wasn't a big fan of Brandon Smith when I put the tape on either.
I have him in the Christian Harris tier.
That's actually not a bad tier.
All right, we'll throw him with the Christian Harris tier. We got to leave some love there.
He had a bad year this past year. I understand that. But when you sort of, go back in time and look at what he had done previous to that, the athletic ability, what he showed in there with Parsons before, I think he has a really good chance to be a starting linebacker in the NFL. I'm not ready to put him up there because he had that down year. But we've seen that from other guys where, for whatever reason, they know they're going to be declaring there's something else going on. They just don't maintain it consistently. Inconsistency is a big issue. I understand that, and that's why I'm not throwing him up in the starter. But his athletic profile and what he had shown previously, I really like.
All right. I have no problem with it. So the worry I had was thinking back to it is it's like, okay, was Micah Parsons making it easier for Brandon Smith, and now that he was on his own having to do something, it just didn't go so well. I just kept going back and forth on it. So I don't hate him in the Christian Harris tier because he's got enough athletic ability and all the things that somebody's gonna be intrigued by him. He's probably a day 2 pick at some point, I would think, probably late, in the 3rd round, I would guess. And we'll see what happens. Brian Asamoah. Austin, where are you putting him at?
Outside linebacker, guy who can play in coverage, not really great at a whole lot, but he's decent. I actually kind of liked him when he played at Oklahoma. I'm probably leaving him on the waiver wire. I don't know if I can put him in the depth category. I want to. I just don't know if I can. Just don't know if I'm there with him.
Kraig, any additions you want to make to that conversation?
With where we have the rest of these guys, he probably is still in that waiver wire tier. If he gets the day 2 draft capital and goes to a good situation where he's going to get immediate playing time, maybe not even as a starter, but just out there for passing downs or pass rushing, that sort of stuff, he could certainly have a role that you could see him sort of going into. Like, this is a bad comp because he was barely drafted, I think, but like Quincy out of the U last year that went to Pittsburgh and then was cut, but he found a home there opposite of Aziz with New York. Something like that where he finds himself in a role, that he could grow into. But yeah, I'm probably not drafting him.
Yeah, he's a guy that I think is one of those that's going to need some time to develop and probably multiple seasons if he gets the opportunity. So I would be with you as well. Micah McFadden, Kraig, what are you doing with him? And do you have any interest in him, anything more than a waiver wire guy?
He's probably, you could throw his own little tier, make it. No, I'm kidding. We don't need to do that. But he's probably in between that like depth of waiver wire type area for me. He had the highest pass rushing grade for linebackers in the Big Ten this past year, which isn't like nothing. It was like a 92 or something by the college PFF stuff.
Right.
He's a decent athlete, but he doesn't have huge size. He's probably going to end up being a day 3 pick. I mean, the pass rushing stuff is really what does it for me. If he didn't have that, he'd easily probably be at the end of the waiver wire. But knowing that he has those chops to go with just being an NFL linebacker, there's some interest there.
Yeah, in my mind, this guy feels like a backup core special teams type guy. Like, I mean, will probably have an NFL, a fairly decent NFL career, but it's not like because of his motor and his drive and things like that. But I don't know that I feel like he's going to give anywhere near any kind of fantasy relevance that I'm touching. So, Austin, do you have anything to add? Did I ask you?
Nope, we're good on that one.
All right, Nick Bonito, I'll send it to you for the last one. Where are you putting him?
Nick Nonito. Let's see. Did your editor catch that one either?
Oh yeah, no, I didn't. I put it in. Nick Nonito.
Yeah,
you're talking him up, Brad, and I am spelling his name too.
You're dying to move him up, and I am too. So let's move him to depth. We'll get one guy out of this waiver wire category, and the reason is I think he probably could have been included in last week's episode on the edge rush category. So we should probably talk about him in that regard because I think that's the more appropriate position for him. The thing I do worry about is over pursuit and just not being in the best position, not being able to get off blocks as effectively. And sometimes he gets washed and he's just not as effective as a tackler, but his pass rush ability is really good. He's able to get to the quarterback. I mean, he had 8 sacks the last 2 years, and I think he even missed some time this past year. Got into a little bit of trouble at school. It was either this year or last year, but so he had missed some time for some of that. So as long as the characteristics are there, that's kind of the thing. You never really know. You can see the football player on the field, but you don't know the person off the field. If he's able to come in though, get his head right, and be focused on football, I think that he could be one of those guys that is a good development player. You have him in the depth category, and you hope he works out and you can move him up.
So full Bud Dupree or only partly Bud Dupree?
That sure. I mean, we love our comps on this show, right?
Yeah, that probably wouldn't even be a great comp, but just as you're talking to him, that's all I'm hearing. Craig, what do you think about him?
I think Bud Dupree had his career made by playing opposite TJ Watt more so than anything. We'll find out this next year that he's fully healthy, hopefully, and back on a defense with some other nice pieces around him. But yeah, I'm fine with end of the depth area. I probably myself, just because I see him more as a pure pass rusher. Like Austin said, if we're talking about the linebacker tier, he's probably waiver wire. If you have that sort of edge position, he's in the depth. So all things considered, depth is fine here. So
it's safe to say we're recommending you draft 4 linebackers in this rookie class, and then think about the next 2 to 4, maybe 6, and then leave off 4. Like, it's really what it comes down to is in the end, this isn't the strongest rookie linebacker class, so be careful out there, right? Is that kind of where we're at to kind of put a bow on this whole thing, Austin?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it feels pretty top heavy, where the guys that you have are, guys that you definitely want to get, and then there's a whole lot of people in the bottom that you can just kind of, decide who you like, but probably not going to pay off. I mean, who knows? We never know with this stuff. Like we talked about earlier, hindsight's always 20/20.
Okay.
Can I have one thing to add to that?
Uh-huh.
These guys, by and large, this entire list is going to be cheaper to get in a year to 3 years. If you go back in 2017 or 2018, I forget which class it is, everything after that, you've had about 2 linebackers in the first 4 rounds have any real impact over the entire length of the season. You've had guys this past year was Parsons and Nick Bolton, and that was pretty much it. You had guys with spurts. You had JOK, you had Ernest Jones. Those guys come in, they had small runs, but over the course of the season, even if you're talking about these top 4 to 6 guys, probably 2 to 3 of them are going to have any long-term impact over the first season. And then you're going to have those guys in your league that drafted them high, didn't get that production, had to sit with them, Don't overdraft these guys in your rookie drafts unless you know that you're going to be willing to sit there and wait on them if they don't pan out. Because we saw that with Zaven Collins last year. We saw that with Jamin Davis. Saw that with, JOK to a degree. You can go down the line. You're going to run into this. So just keep in mind that even if you think, oh, wow, this guy, I think he's going to be a stud or a starter, you might have to wait 2 or 3 years for it to happen. I mean, Logan Wilson, I mean, he was a day 2 pick, I think. He could have been the 4th round 2 years ago. He didn't do anything his first year, and you probably could have got him off of waiver wires last year.
You're absolutely right. 100p. All right, so that is it for the main portion of the show. For those of you that are watching on YouTube, like, subscribe to the notification icon. You can see every time we go live. Mondays, Tuesdays, Thursdays. During the season, we go live all sorts of different times. If you're listening in podcast form after the fact, thank you. We do appreciate you listening to the soothing sounds of the IDP Heat Seekers. We love a rating and review. We are going to let y'all go to some Q&A. We got some folks with some great questions. So thank you as always, everybody. We're out. Okay, so now on to the questions. Amazing friend of the show, Jaws, been with us since the beginning, and OG has a question. We probably did not give him a lot of help tonight because I don't think he should be spending any of the second-round picks on rookie linebackers. But in and on Superflex, he's got 2 seconds. He's got 2.2, 2.6, and he obviously was going to school in this episode, and he returned a D for us. We're not touching it. I would say 3.2 if you want to target a linebacker, maybe. But by then, I think Devin Lloyd might be gone. You're probably targeting that next tier of guys. Kraig, what do you think? Are there any IDP relevant guys that he should be looking at 2.2, 2.6? Let's expand it to not just linebackers. Let's just say, hey, 2.2, 2.6, 3.2. Who are you thinking? Is there anybody that you're targeting in there at all?
I mean, I'd want to see landing spots of Hamilton, Thibodeau, Hutchinson, Lloyd, Dean, depending on the draft capital that those sort of guys get in your league setup. If you have edge versus are these guys going to be defensive ends, or, if you have Hutchinson that's only going to be labeled as a linebacker in your league, that sort of kicks him out of the conversation for me because I don't think that he's going to be getting you enough points to be worthy of starting as a linebacker to start in your league. But if you're really hurting at linebacker and, Lloyd goes to a great spot, let's say he goes to the Eagles or something like that, where they haven't had a whole lot in the middle that they've been able to consistently play, but there's still production there, and he's just going to slot in as the guy for them. Yeah, I could see taking him at 2.6. I don't know that I'd feel great about it, but if your need meets the situation and draft capital, I wouldn't use 2.2 by any means on a defensive guy. Right player, right situation, 2.6, sure, and then any of those guys that fit what you need at 3.2.
Austin?
Yeah, I agree. I think early as second, there's going to be plenty of talent left there on the offensive side to go offense. 2.6 is probably as early as I would want to take him, and I would say that if you need that linebacker depth, he's the guy that you want. I think if you wait any longer than 2.6, then you are probably just going to count yourself out of those sweepstakes. So if he's a guy that you love and you want to get him, that's probably actually the sweet spot. You just got to kind of hope that no one else overdrafts him even higher than that. But that's probably that sweet spot where, like, if anybody's going to take him, that's kind of going to have to be the spot if you really love him. Otherwise, you just expect to miss out on him.
There you go, Josh. Hopefully that gives you something to think about. Definitely interesting. This will be an interesting draft. I'm probably targeting mostly offense in the first 2 rounds, unless it's mid to late second. I think is probably where I start feeling interested in taking them, depending on my leagues. My typical standard IDP leagues, probably. Let's see here. Go. Okay. Whoa.
There's a follow-up question from Josway at the end that we can just jump to quick because it's not a yes or no type of question like the other ones. It is unlike the other ones.
Oh, are we talking about this one?
Yeah.
Okay.
So Flea Flicker does have the edge position if your league is set up that way. So depending on how your league is currently set up, or if that's a change that you want to make, you can have that edge position, and then the alternate with that is the interior lineman. So
there you go. All right, next up from Jaws. Any hints on Joe Scobert signing, and if he still has the tackle vacuum juice? Also, Kenneth Murray set for a rebound with a nice D line in front of him. Most recent news is people saying where Scobert fits ideally. He has not signed anywhere. And he's probably one of those guys you're going to see sign after the draft when teams figure out if they're able to get a linebacker to play in the middle. I think he still has value if he goes to a team where he's going to not have to sit on the sidelines and watch. I mean, if he goes in somewhere where he's able to play a significant amount, he's still got the ability to be a good tackler and be able to get you some good tackles. What do you think, Austin?
I wouldn't be surprised to see him go unsigned into the season and then get picked up by a team that might have some injuries or something like that. And that could potentially thrust him into a situation where he's able to see the field a little more than he expected or than we expected this season. So if you're a believer in something like that, he's the Cam Newton of linebackers, I guess, at this point, where you just pick him up and hold him and hope that he gets a job.
And then trade him.
Yeah, there you go. So yeah, I mean, but I'm not a big fan of Joe, you know. I mean, he is a tackle machine, but I mean, if you got different options or better options, he should probably not be like a top 3 linebacker for you, or you're in a bad situation.
All right, Craig, Kenneth Murray, what do you think about him going into this season with a nicer D line?
I wasn't a fan of him when he came out, and he's sort of just proven that he isn't able thus far to hold up as a linebacker and be productive for you. And I don't know that coaching staff really has a lot of faith in him right now. And the fact that he just had ankle surgery of some sort, which is putting him to the start of the question in doubt, start of the season in doubt, in question. Yeah, I don't have a whole lot of interest. If you can get him free and stash him just to see if something happens, go for it. I mean, he has the draft capital, and they're not going to completely give up on him. Otherwise, I think they probably would have already. But he's a guy, too, that you could see them take Lloyd or Dean or someone like this, and it just puts a nail in the coffin of his value because there aren't a whole lot of holes in that team right now. So I'm not really looking forward to Murray producing anything.
There you go. All right, final question from our boy off the schneid. Is there a new linebacker position developing in the NFL with guys like Parsons, Sampson, Ebukam, Hassan Reddick, where the undersized DEOLB, defensive and outside linebacker, but succeed in pass rush? So, you know, the pass rush specialist, I hear that term thrown around a lot. So I think you're seeing a lot of, you know, like we've already, you know, like we mentioned in the chats, like we mentioned here, you know, I think even Craig said it, you know, kind of the chess piece conversation. They want as many good athletes and guys that can do specific things as possible so they can move them around the formation and have them go. For a fantasy perspective, I don't know that makes them extremely relevant and makes them very concerning. You know, Ebukam and Reddick are guys that, you know, have been kind of up and down because of that. Parsons so far has only got 1 year and he's been solid. But Austin, what do you take and what do you make of this question?
I think that there's some substance to the question for sure. I think that when you look at what those players have done and how they've been able to pile those points on, it's not like they're just always playing off ball. You see a guy like Micah Parsons who's able to walk up and still be effective on the line. You see a guy who's able to still be effective in coverage. And so it's kind of like what we talked about with Nakobe Dean, where I said, or I'm sorry, not Nakobe Dean, but Devin Lloyd, where we said, you know, this is a guy who's going to be on the field a lot. He's probably not going to leave, and it's going to transition for him. It's those are qualities that are going to translate. And so, you know, that's kind of why I put let's see, where's my list at? Because I want to make sure I get this name right. Yeah. So we're talking about Leo Chanal as well. He was a guy who I put in the starter category that potentially could be more because of his pass rush abilities and things that he can do outside of just playing linebacker. So I think there's some substance to the question. But of course, you know, like you said, Hassan Reddick's kind of been up and down. I think he's different than Micah Parsons, but it's something to definitely keep an eye on. It's something that I pay attention to. And especially if I've got like a Hassan Reddick, who's, you know, in MFL, I think he's labeled a edge rusher, and you're able to get linebacker numbers out of him. Like, that's huge because fantasy is all about scoring points, right? So it's kind of the way I think of this.
All right, Craig, close it out. What do you think about that?
I mean, they're using players more flexibly across the NFL because the offense is doing that and the defense is having to react, and you're having to find guys that are able to do more than one thing because then you can disguise your defenses better, sort of like Isaiah Simmons, JOK, you know, those guys that have been, whether it's a hybrid linebacker safety or safety through a lot of college, and now they're going to be playing more linebacker. It's the same sort of thing where these guys that are built to be able to rush off the edge but have been primary linebackers in college. I mean, Reddick probably would have had a better career so far besides the past 2 years if they would have used him correctly in Arizona from the start and not just tried to peg him as a middle linebacker, because he wasn't made to be that. So that's again where we talk about landing spot does matter for a lot of these defensive guys, because some guys you can use all over the place, but there's some guys still that just need to be utilized the right way or they're not going to maximize their talent. Landing spot isn't a nail in the coffin of a career. We saw that with Reddick, where last year in Arizona, they used him correctly, had a breakout year. He repeated it in Carolina, and now he was handsomely rewarded to hopefully be used the same way in Philadelphia. Assuming that, he's going to be a great player for you. Parsons, it's the same sort of thing where, yeah, he can rush off the edge, but we know opposite of Reddick, if you put Parsons in the middle, he's going to survive and be just fine for you as a regular linebacker too. So I don't know it's so much a new position. It's just that thing of what flexibility do you have with your players? And then are you recognizing it and using them correctly? Because if you mismanage it for IDP purposes, they might end up being dead to us. And then the whole thing about settings and all that. If you have that edge position, it gives you more flexibility for some of those guys.
That's it. I like it. We put a bow on it. We answered your questions. Hopefully that was all helpful and beneficial. We do appreciate y'all for hanging out with us. We do this every Monday night throughout the off season. As we get to the regular season, obviously Monday Night Football, some people tell me is more entertaining than us, but probably not by much. We are the most dynamic group of IDP content creators on the planet. Self-proclaimed, obviously.
You're going to Hulk up there, Brad, and tell them to take their vitamins?
Ooh, yeah. Say your prayers. I've been doing my WWE wrestling impersonations, and I am a guy from the 90s when it comes to when I actually watch wrestling. So
when wrestling was good.
I mean, that's when I watched it, so it was good for me.
When they still called it wrestling and not sports entertainment.
It is back then it was wrestling, depending on what channel you watch. So
there you go.
So there you go. So thank you guys always for hanging out with us. We do love each and every comment, every view. We love chatting with you guys and chopping it up every week. Don't forget, tomorrow night, come back. We will be live, the offensive show, where you will not see any of us. But then on Thursday night, we got Devi. Me and Desi will be talking some Devi, and then next week is draft week. So sit tight, buckle up. It should be a fun week, people. We thank you guys as always. We love you, and we'll see you later.